Hello and welcome back to Two Dark Dozes. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy dark doses of horror that hit you twice as hard, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. It was not only that she died, it was what happened to her body after that. She had begun to rot. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw her face beside me. Her once beautiful face was swollen in strange places, puffed up with round, ugly lumps. Her eyes were open but empty, staring at nothing. I had woken up to that face so many mornings before, but it had never looked like this. I used to love waking up beside her. I used to love seeing the sunlight touch her skin and hair. Now I could not stand the thought of waking up without her. When I moved her from the pillow, there was something left behind, some kind of dark residue, like ash or dirt, staining the fabric where her head had been. I picked her up anyway. I pulled her into my arms and held her against my chest. Her skin was cold, too cold. She was heavy in a way I had never felt before. I had carried her before, laughing, playing, lifting her when she pretended to be tired. But this was different. This weight was dead weight. I could carry her body forever if I had to, but I could not carry the pain that came with it. I could not carry the grief. I could not carry this torture. There was something like soot on her face. It darkened her cheeks and forehead, as if smoke had touched her skin. I cried so hard that my tears fell onto her face, and where they landed, they washed little trails through the black dust. They looked like rivers cutting through a burned valley. For 1 weak second, I hoped the skin underneath would shine the way it used to. She had always seemed to glow, especially in the morning light. But the skin beneath the ash was not glowing. It was discolored like the rest of her. It was the middle of the night. I do not know how long I held her. Eventually, I set her back down in bed. I tucked the blanket around her like I used to do when she fell asleep before me. From far away, if I stood in the doorway and did not look too closely, she almost looked like she was sleeping. Like any second, she might take a breath, turn her head, and ask me why I was standing there, staring at her. I tried to remember what had happened the night before, but everything was blurry. I had come home from work. She had dinner ready, the way she always did, even though she worked long hours, too. She had set everything on the table and waited for me so we could eat together. I had already had a few drinks before I sat down. I remembered that much. We talked about our days. We had not been fighting as much lately. I did not know if that meant she had given up, or if she had finally started seeing things my way and wanted to fix us. At the time, I did not care which one it was. The house had finally become quiet again. Peaceful. Now I stood in the doorway of our room and watched her. I did not know what to do. I had cried for what felt like hours. I had stared at her even longer, pretending she was still asleep. Her hair still had its color. That soft blonde shine was still there. It was the same hair that used to glow when sunlight touched it. I thought I could leave her there until morning. Just let her rest. No one would know I had woken in the night. No one would know I had found her like this. I could stay by the door and watch the sun rise on her hair. I could see it glow one last time. Then I looked at the clock on her nightstand. It read 6:04 a.m. The numbers made no sense. The clock was not moving. The colon between the numbers did not blink. It just sat there, frozen, showing a time that could not exist. I did not understand what was happening. I knew I was not dreaming. I had already tried to wake myself up. I had slammed my head against the wall. I had punched the bed frame while holding her, and the wood had cracked under my fist. My knuckles were swollen and throbbing. This was a nightmare, but it was not a dream. The shadows in our house were wrong. They moved in ways shadows should not move. Downstairs, some light usually came through the front windows from the street lamps outside, but tonight there was only blackness. It looked like the windows did not lead to the street anymore. They looked like they opened into a deep, empty void. From that darkness came a humming sound, low and steady. I looked back at my wife. Should I leave her there by herself? Was her soul still in the room? Was she standing beside the bed, watching me? I hoped she could not see my pain. Then another part of me hoped she could. Maybe then she would know how much I loved her. Maybe then she would understand it for sure. I love you, I thought. I love you. I love you. I love you. I had not said it enough. I knew I had to go downstairs. Something was wrong with the house. When I reached the main floor, I realized there was light after all. The windows were not black because the outside had disappeared. They were black because the glass was coated in the same dark stuff that had been on her face. It looked like ash, like the black dust left on your fingers after touching charcoal. It covered the windows and blocked the streetlight. The kitchen clock read 00:36 a.m. There were symbols on the walls. They had been drawn into the ash that covered everything. Each one was a circle with letters around the edge. Inside the circle were wings and 3 crosses. The marks looked like someone had dragged their hand through the soot to make them. Hello? I called. No one answered. I stood there, breathing hard, staring at the walls. Why did my house look like this? Had there been a fire? Maybe something electrical had happened while we were sleeping. Maybe smoke had filled the house. Maybe she had been burned or poisoned somehow. I flipped the light switch. Nothing happened. But the clocks worked. That made no sense. Why did the clocks work if the lights did not? Why were they showing different times? Why were they showing things that were not even real times? I thought about the breaker box. I had to check it. The breaker was in the basement. Then I noticed the humming again. It was coming from behind the basement door. The sound was deep and constant, like a huge machine running underground. I wondered if whatever had killed her was down there. Maybe she had been shocked. Maybe something in the basement had burned her. As I moved toward the basement stairs, I passed the bathroom. The bathroom light was on, so bright that it hurt my eyes. A towel lay on the floor near the door. I did not remember leaving it there. I did not remember much of anything clearly. How drunk had I gotten? Then a memory came back to me. It came slowly at first, then all at once. I remembered that towel. I had used it before, many times. I remembered last night. She had wanted to be close to me. She had wanted me for the first time in a long time. But I could not do it. Not with her. I had watched too much online. I had seen too much. My mind had become twisted and numb. I could not feel the way I was supposed to feel with my own wife. But after she fell asleep, I still went into the bathroom alone. The basement doorknob began to rattle. The door shook in its frame. The humming behind it grew louder. I stepped back. I wished I could go upstairs and wake her up. I wished I could bring her down with me. I was scared. I could not do this alone. So I went back upstairs to check on her. She was gone. She was not in the bed anymore. I pulled the covers back. I checked the floor. I checked the other side of the bed like she might have somehow rolled away. But there was nothing there except the shape of her body left behind in black dust. The outline lay on the sheet where she had been. Was she alive? No, she could not be. She had been cold. Her skin had been cold in my arms. Then I saw empty vodka bottles on the floor near the bed. They had not been there before. I was sure of it. "Addie?" I whispered. There was no answer. I looked toward the stairs. Ashy footprints led down from the bedroom. They were small and dark. Her footprints. She was alive. She had to be. A loud noise shook the house. It was heavy and sudden, like something huge had slammed against a wall. The symbols on the walls began to glow red, the whole house filled with that crimson light. I went back down to the main floor, moving faster now, following the footprints. I passed the bathroom again. The towel was still there, but now it was red. Soaked, the basement door was open. Her footprints led to it. I had to go after her. Nothing made sense, but I had to find her. The basement was dark, but red light also came from inside it. It glowed from below, yet I could not see past the blackness. Then I heard her crying. She was down there. She was weeping in the dark. "I'm coming," I said. The humming grew so loud that it filled my skull. It was deep and low, and it shook the ash from the walls. The black dust fell in thin, pale flakes. But through it all, I could still hear her crying. Then, the humming stopped. I was in the basement. At first, I could see almost nothing except the red shapes of furniture. Our basement bar. The old couch. Boxes, shelves, everything was only a shadow outlined in red. Then I heard footsteps. Fast, light, skittering footsteps. They moved behind me, then up the wall, then across the ceiling. Something was moving around me in the dark. The red light grew brighter. I saw her. Her shape was on top of the bar, surrounded by vodka bottles. She was crouched low with both hands pressed on the counter in front of her. She looked like a dog sitting with its head tilted. Her head turned toward me, curious and wrong. "Addie?" The second I spoke, I knew I should not have. She sprang off the bar like a cat. Bottles smashed across the floor. The red light seemed to disappear, and everything went black again. I needed to find the breaker. I needed light. Then I saw something in the corner. A ram's head. It was black, like a shadow, but I could make it out in the red glow. Next to it, a dark hand lifted and pointed with long talon like fingers toward the other corner. I turned and saw a goat's head there. Both figures stood still, watching me. Then the goat-headed figure slowly raised its arm too. The skittering footsteps rushed behind me again. I turned, searching for my wife. I had to get her out of there. Behind the bar, something scaled shifted in the red light. I saw the shine of its skin. I saw an eye, round and wet, like a fish's eye, staring at me. Then it began to vomit. Thick liquid spilled out over the bar and across the floor. It poured down like a flood. The basement began to fill with it. I backed away, gagging. The smell was horrible. It smelled like rotten liquor, sour stomach acid, and decay. I looked toward the corner again. The ram-headed thing was gone. My wife was there now. She clung upside down to the ceiling. Her body held itself there like an insect. Her head hung strangely, as if it was dangling by a string. It swayed while her mirrored eyes stared down at me. Then she opened her mouth far wider than any human mouth should open. "How could you do this to me?" She screamed. I had to run. I could not reach her. The vomit was already up to my waist. I stumbled back up the stairs and slammed into the main floor. The symbols were everywhere now. They covered the walls. They glowed brighter and brighter, filling the house with red light. There was a figure standing in my kitchen. The red light wrapped around it. It had horns like both a ram and a goat. Its body was covered in scales. It stood on hooves. Its fur was spotted like an animal's hide. Low on its body, where no human face should ever be, there was the face of a man. The man's eyes were rolled back, and his mouth hung open. "Be not afraid," the figure said. Its voice was wet and rough, like a growl bubbling through water. I should not have understood it, but I did. I heard skittering again. My wife was clinging to the creature's back. She hung there like a frightened child, or like a spider waiting to strike. "Be not afraid." The words stirred something in my mind. I remembered hearing that phrase from the Bible. People said angels told humans not to be afraid. Was that true? Was that the most repeated phrase? I could not think clearly. I remembered Ezekiel describing beings with many faces, but I could not remember the details. Could this thing be an angel? "What are you?" I asked. "A messenger," it answered. "A messenger of what?" "What is happening to my wife?" "A vision. Futures, repentance its bane. Through me. Lust, gluttony." My wife screamed from its back. "Where is what we once had?" The words hit me hard. Our 5-year anniversary. She had said that to me on our 5-year anniversary. I had forgotten it. I had been too drunk. I had ruined that night. Why was I always drunk? "Repentance," I said quickly. "Okay, I'll do anything." The thing stared down at me. "The fourth cardinal," it said, "weighed the bile. Forbid pestilence." My wife leapt from its back and ran on all fours. Her hands slapped against the blackened floor. She crashed through the basement door and disappeared down the stairs. I followed her. The stairs were black again. Below, I could see red light reflecting in the rising flood of vomit. The smell of vodka was everywhere. When I reached the basement again, I saw myself. Not just one of me. Countless versions of me. They knelt in the bile with black, glassy eyes shaped like the mouths of bottles. They scooped the foul liquid into their mouths with both hands. They drank it like starving animals. Every copy of me stared at me while they consumed it. Greedy, hungry, empty, I stepped off the stairs and into the liquid. They swam toward me. Hands grabbed my legs beneath the surface. So many hands. Their mouths hung open as they clung to me, letting the vomit drift into them with every step I took. They tried to hold me back. They tried to pull me under and drown me. I looked up. My wife was crawling across the ceiling above me, her neck bent backward so she could watch me. She smiled down at me while I struggled forward. Her smile kept me above the surface. I pushed toward the fourth corner of the basement, the south corner. A man stood there. It was the same face I had seen on the creature in the kitchen. His eyes burned like fire inside black, burnt sockets. Thick fluid leaked from them. When I reached him, he dropped into the bile and vanished beneath the surface. I looked down. His flaming eyes stared up at me from under the clear, black liquid. His mouth opened, and the flood began to spin into it like water going down a drain. His lips did not move, but I heard his voice. "Thy gluttony consumed." The walls shook. My copies wailed. One by one, they spun away and vanished into nothing. The flood drained with them. The horrible liquid disappeared into the man's mouth until the basement floor was bare again. I turned around. The strange figure stood behind me. It raised one long, clawed finger toward the ceiling. The ideals of Lamech, it said. Observe the second consort. Forbid indulgence. Above me, I heard my wife rush up the stairs. I followed. The bathroom light was still on. This time the door was shut. A bright line of light shone under it. A foamy liquid leaked out across the floor, shining in that harsh white glow. I did not see my wife anywhere. I opened the bathroom door. A woman was inside. She was naked and stretched out on the toilet in a strange, unnatural pose. She ran her hands over her own body, dragging her nails across her skin hard enough to leave red marks. Soap and oils covered her. Her hair was wet. She looked at me with want in her eyes. I felt the pull of it. I felt my old sickness waking up. I could have gone to her right then, and the thought made me hate myself. Why could I not be that way with my wife last night? Why could I not want the woman who had loved me, cooked for me, waited for me, cried for me? Before I could move, an ashen hand slammed the bathroom door shut. My wife's face was suddenly inches from mine. Tears streamed from her cloudy eyes. What do they all have that I don't? She screamed. Her sob was horrible. Her swollen gray face twisted in pain, tears mixed with dark fluid running from her eyes and nose. The smell was rotten and sour. She had always smelled so good before. Clean, warm, sweet. Now she smelled like death, and she was in so much pain. She grabbed her hair and wailed. She pulled at her beautiful blonde locks, ripping them out in handfuls. A growl rolled up from the basement. I looked past her. Two eyes stared from the darkness, low to the ground. Wide shoulders rose and fell behind them as something moved closer. When I looked back at my wife, she was smiling. The smile was huge. Too huge. It split the rotten skin around her mouth. Her teeth were yellow. Her gums were black. She was still crying, but I had not seen her smile like that in years. She nodded slowly, staring into me. Behind her, claws scratched along the floor. The growling became louder. My wife threw the bathroom door open. The growl became a roar. A leopard leapt into the room and attacked the naked woman. I watched as it tore into her. My wife cheered beside me. She screamed and clapped like a child watching fireworks. She jumped up and down, and each time her feet hit the floor, they made a wet, sick sound. The woman screamed and reached for me, begging for help, but I could not move. The leopard ripped at her, tearing her apart with savage hunger. Blood sprayed across the bathroom. The animal lifted its head, its mouth soaked red, strands of flesh hanging from its teeth. Then the leopard looked at me. Thy lust consumed, it said. My wife knelt beside it and stroked its bloody fur. The leopard purred and rubbed its head against her rotten thigh. She kissed it. Blood smeared across her face. She rubbed it into her skin with her fingers, then pushed those fingers into her mouth as if tasting it. I stepped back, shaking. I needed my wife back. This was not my wife. She scampered away on her toes like a sneaky child. The leopard ran after her. The flame-eyed man climbed out of the basement. All of them were going upstairs. The house shook harder. I ran after them. When I reached the bedroom, my wife was on her knees. She was bowing low with her forehead pressed to the carpet. The figure had split apart again. The ram, the fish, and the goat stood around her, forming a triangle with their arms. The leopard and the flame-eyed man walked into the center of that triangle. The floor began to crack. The same symbol from the walls carved itself into the carpet and wood. It glowed brighter than all the others. Lines of light spread out from it, filling the room. Fire erupted around the figures. It rose in twisting pillars, hot and violent. The flames moved around the leopard and the man, covering them both. Their shapes shifted inside the fire. Shadows rolled over them and then pulled away, revealing something new. The man was gone. In his place stood a creature with patterned fur. Its face was feline, like a leopard. Its eyes burned orange. On its forehead was the same glowing symbol from the walls and floor. A long tail moved behind it through the flames. Feathered wings pushed out from its back, wide and grand. The tips of the wings seemed made from fire itself. It was terrible. It was beautiful. It was an angel. God had come to save me. God had come to save my wife. Can you save her? I asked. The angel flapped its wings. Fire burst outward, and I felt the heat against my face. My wife was inside the flames, still kneeling. She was crying again. Save her, the angel said. Save thyself. Thou art beyond forgiveness. Grace garnered, I offer. Commit to her. Commit to me. My wife stood up, sobbing. She walked deeper into the fire and screamed as the flames touched her. The angel held out a clawed hand and beckoned me. It wanted me to walk through the fire. The bed caught fire behind her. My wife climbed into it, screaming, "Through thy devotion thou shalt bathe sin's corruption." The angel said, "Cleanse in my flames. Awake anew." She pulled the covers over herself while she burned. The clock on the nightstand read 64:36 a.m. I walked into the fire. It swallowed me. My skin blistered, split, and peeled. I felt fluid leaking from me. My flesh burned and blackened. My eyes melted into darkness. I could not see. I could not find my way. Then I felt a soft paw press against my back. It pushed me forward. I reached out with raw hands and felt the covers. I had found the bed. The covers lifted. The paw guided me down. I lay beside her. I felt heat on my teeth because my lips were gone. Something tucked me in. My burning body sank into the mattress. My flesh fused with it. I was dying, but I was not afraid. I thought I would see her in heaven. I thought the angel had saved her, saved me, saved us. Thank you, God, I thought. Then I heard her voice. Wake up, dear. She was alive. My wife was alive. Sunlight came through the bedroom window and touched her blonde hair. Her skin was clean and pure. Her eyes sparkled as she leaned over me in bed. She was warm. She was breathing. She was alive. I broke. I cried harder than I had ever cried before. I pulled her down to me and held her so tightly that her confused words were muffled against my chest. I could feel her heartbeat. I could feel the warmth of her skin. I wish everyone could know what it feels like to touch the warm skin of someone you love after touching that same skin cold. She felt light again, like she was carrying part of her own weight with life inside her. Holding her felt like holding a feather that had fallen from an angel's wing. She was grace. I had been given grace. When our faces pulled apart, I saw her soul in her eyes again. I had never understood how beautiful that was until I knew what it felt like to see those eyes empty. She was whole again, my beautiful wife. I promised myself I would never waste another moment with her. I would love her forever. I would tell her every day, I would not forget. She was sacred. She had been restored. What I saw that night was a nightmare, but it was not a dream. That morning, I went downstairs to fulfill my first promise. I went to the bar in the basement to pour all my bottles down the drain. The basement smelled foul, like a distillery had been vomited up and left to rot. There was water damage halfway up the drywall. The floor was stained. The wood behind the bar was warped. The whole room felt damp and sick. When I came back upstairs, soap, oil, and water were running out from under the bathroom door. I opened it. There was blood on the toilet. There was also yellow fur stuck to the porcelain and scattered across the floor. I sent my wife out to get her hair done, her beautiful blonde hair. I did not want her to leave my sight, not even for a second. But I needed to clean the house. I needed to hide what had happened before she remembered. What if she remembered? What if the vision had touched her too? I scrubbed everything. I cleaned the basement. I cleaned the bathroom. I cleaned the bedroom. I found ash under our bed and deep in the carpet. There were smoke stains on the ceiling. The symbols were still faintly visible on the walls, not as marks, but as lighter shapes where the soot had once been. I scrubbed them until my hands hurt. Then I got into the shower. That was when I found the mark. There was a brand on my back where the paw had touched me. It was a circle with letters around the border. Inside were 2 wings and 3 crosses, the same heavenly symbol I had seen all over the house. The symbol of the angel. When I saw it in the mirror, everything came back to me. Not in broken pieces, not like a dream fading after waking up. It came back clear. Every sight, every sound, every breath, the black dust, the impossible clock, the vial in the basement, my copies drinking from it, the woman in the bathroom, the leopard, the flame-eyed man, my wife crawling on the ceiling, the angel's wings, the fire. Time felt strange when I remembered it. It felt like I was there again and remembering it at the same time, like the angel did not live in time the way we do, like it could touch every moment at once. I think the angel marked me so I would never forget. It will not let me forget what my wife looked like when she was dead. It will not let me forget what my sins could cost me. It will not let me forget the oath I made. I will commit myself to my wife by committing myself to the angel. This mark reminds me of its mercy. It reminds me of its correction. I am grateful to that holy angel. It brought my wife back to me. My beautiful wife. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I will never stop saying it. I have written this as it came back to me, sometimes like it is happening now, sometimes like I am remembering it from far away. That was the nature of the angel. It was beyond normal time. It moved through past, present, and future as if they were all one thing. I hope this warns whoever reads it. I am grateful for the angel's intervention, but I pray no other soul ever has to witness what I witnessed. I pray no one else has to see the manifestations of the leopard angel. Fix your future now. Repent while you still can. Because if you do not, you may wake in the middle of the night and find the person you love dead beside you. And when you look at the clock, it may read 64:36. Story 2. I have told pieces of this story many times before. I told it to police officers. I told it to news crews when they came asking questions. I told it to curious people who heard rumors and wanted to know if any of it was true. But I have never really sat down and written the whole thing the way I remember it. I have never put every detail in order from beginning to end. For years, I tried not to think about it too much. I told myself the past was over and there was no reason to drag it back into my life. But something happened recently, and now I cannot stop thinking about that night. I keep seeing the swamp in my head. I keep hearing the sound of heavy breathing in the dark. I keep seeing those red eyes every time I close mine. So I am writing this down because maybe if I finally say it all, it will stop living inside my chest like a secret I should have buried a long time ago. My name is Jason Sparks. From 1981 to 1984, I worked as a camp counselor at Camp Clearwater in Cheneyville, Louisiana. The thing I am about to tell you happened during the last week I ever worked there. After that summer, I never went back. I never returned as a counselor, never visited as an adult, and never drove by the place if I could avoid it. Even hearing the name of that camp still makes my stomach tighten. Before I ever got hired at Camp Clearwater, I had already heard stories about it. It had a reputation around town, the kind of reputation that people speak about in low voices, but then laugh off when someone asks too many questions. I was young back then, and I thought most of it was just small-town legend. Every old place has a few ghost stories. Every camp has kids telling each other scary things after lights out. I did not take any of it seriously at first. The camp sat right on the edge of a swamp. The main cabins, the mess hall, the activity areas, and the docks were on firmer land, but the southern side of the property just faded into wet ground and thick trees. There was no real boundary there. No fence, no warning signs, nothing to tell the kids where the camp ended and the swamp began. The grass turned softer. The trees grew closer together, and before you knew it, you were standing in mud with mosquitoes whining around your face. During the 3 years I worked there, we were always chasing campers away from that side of the property. Kids are curious by nature. Tell them not to go somewhere, and they will spend the rest of the day wondering what is hiding there. Some would walk toward the swamp to look for frogs. Some wanted to scare each other. Some just wandered because they were bored. We always pulled them back and told them it was dangerous, but there was nothing physical stopping them from going in. Every summer I worked there, a camper went missing. One camper. Each year. Like clockwork. It always happened the same way. At night, after lights out, every camper would be counted. Everyone would be in bed. The counselors would do their checks, the cabins would quiet down, and everything would seem normal. Then morning would come, and someone would be gone. Not late for breakfast, not hiding behind a cabin. Gone, police would come. Search parties would be formed. Dogs would be brought in. Counselors would be questioned. The swamp would be searched as much as anyone dared to search it. Parents would arrive terrified and angry. For a few days, the whole camp would feel like the center of the world. Then, little by little, the noise would fade. The search would slow down. The police would leave. The parents would go home with no answers. And eventually, camp would continue like nothing had happened. As far as I know, none of those families ever got closure. That was the part that bothered me the most. It was not just the disappearances, it was the silence afterward. It felt like everyone wanted to move past it too quickly. People whispered, but nobody really pushed. Nobody demanded hard answers. Nobody seemed willing to connect the pattern right in front of them. One missing child could be a tragedy. 2 could maybe still be called bad luck. But 3 summers in a row? 1 camper each time? That was not something I could ignore. There was another counselor there named Luke Bailey. He was about my age, and we got close during those summers. Luke was the only person who seemed as bothered by it as I was. We talked about those disappearances constantly. Sometimes we talked late at night after the campers were asleep. Sometimes we talked while repairing equipment or setting up activities. We kept going in circles, asking the same questions again and again. Was it the land? Was it a person? Was there something out in the swamp? Was someone taking kids from the cabins? Was there a hidden trail we did not know about? Was it connected to old stories about the property? We never found a real answer, but both of us felt the same thing. Whatever was happening did not feel random. It felt like there was a reason behind it, a pattern, a habit, something old and practiced. During my last summer at Camp Clearwater, the final week felt strange even before anything happened. It was the end of the season, and everyone was tired. The kids were restless because they knew they were going home soon. The counselors were exhausted and ready for real beds, real showers, and quiet mornings. I remember feeling like the air itself was heavy that week. Maybe that is just my memory changing things because of what happened later, but I swear the camp felt wrong. The last night of camp, Luke woke me up around 1 in the morning. I was sleeping in the counselor cabin, running on maybe 2 hours of rest. At first, I thought there was an emergency. Luke was standing beside my bed, whispering my name and shaking my shoulder. When I opened my eyes, he looked serious, but not panicked. He told me he wanted to take a canoe into the swamp. I told him he was crazy. We had gone into the swamp before. Not deep, and never for long, but enough to look around. We had never found anything except mud, insects, dead branches, and the kind of silence that makes you feel watched. I was tired. I was frustrated. I did not want another pointless trip into black water in the middle of the night. But Luke would not let it go. He said it was the last night. He said if something happened every summer, then maybe this was our last chance to find anything. He had brought a Polaroid camera with him. I remember that clearly. He held it like it was some kind of weapon or proof that we were not just two scared young men chasing rumors. I did not bring much of anything. Neither of us brought a flashlight, which was one of the dumbest choices we ever made. We had gone out before and come back with nothing, so we were careless. We did not think we would actually find anything. Looking back now, I cannot believe how stupid we were. But when you are young, tired, and convinced that nothing truly bad will happen to you, you make stupid choices. We slipped down to the water and took one of the canoes. The camp was quiet behind us. The cabins were dark. The mess hall sat like a sleeping animal in the distance. We pushed off and paddled toward the southern edge of the property. The swamp was completely still that night. That is one of the strongest memories I have. There was no wind, no movement in the trees. The moon was sitting at just the right angle, shining through gaps in the branches and reflecting off the water. It gave us just enough light to see the surface ahead of us. The water looked black in some places and silver in others. What I remember most is the quiet. It was not normal quiet. It was the kind of quiet that feels like everything around you is holding its breath. You could hear the smallest sounds from far away. A drop of water sliding off a leaf. A bug landing near the canoe. The soft scrape of our paddles dipping in and out of the water. Neither of us spoke. I do not think we wanted to hear our own voices. We paddled for maybe 20 minutes. Maybe less. Maybe more. Time felt strange out there. I was already thinking about telling Luke we should turn back. I was tired, and the whole thing suddenly felt childish. Then, Luke stopped paddling. He raised one hand and pointed. At first, I did not see what he was pointing at. The trees, vines, and shadows all blended together. Then I noticed a shape set back from the waterline. It was a structure, but it looked like the swamp had almost swallowed it. Dark green vines covered the walls. The roof sagged in places. The bottom looked half sunk into the wet ground. If the moonlight had been any weaker, I would have missed it completely. There was a small dock in front of it. The wood looked old and soft, but it was still standing. We guided the canoe toward it and tied off as best as we could. My first thought was that it must have been an old fishing hut, maybe built long before the camp existed. It was one story, abandoned and clearly forgotten. The swamp had been slowly taking it back piece by piece. I did not want to go inside. I remember standing on that dock and looking at the doorway, feeling a deep pressure in my chest. Luke was already moving toward it, and I did not want to be left alone outside, so I followed him. Inside, it was completely black. The moonlight did not reach far through the doorway. The second we stepped in, it felt like the darkness closed around us. I could not see my hand in front of my face. I could not see Luke. I could not see the walls or the floor. We moved slowly, feeling our way along with our hands. The air inside smelled like rot, wet wood, and something else I could not place. Something sour and old. I kept reaching along the walls, looking for a light switch, even though I knew there was almost no chance the electricity worked. My fingers brushed damp wood, peeling paint, and spider webs. I found a switch at one point and flipped it up and down. Nothing happened. We stayed like that for a few minutes, stumbling quietly through the dark. Then we heard breathing. It was slow and heavy. Not the breathing of a small animal. Not the breath of someone sleeping softly in the corner. This was deep and rough, like something large was sitting somewhere inside that black building with us. It breathed in slowly, then out slowly. Each exhale seemed to fill the room. I froze. Luke froze too. Neither of us said a word. For a few seconds, I tried to tell myself it was just the building settling or air moving through cracks in the walls. But it kept happening. In, out, in, out. It had weight to it. It had life. We started moving toward the sound, though I do not know why. Fear does strange things to your mind. Sometimes it makes you run. Sometimes it makes you stand still. And sometimes it makes you take one step closer to the thing you should be escaping from. We followed the breathing until we reached what felt like a doorway. I could feel the edges of the frame with my hands. The breathing was directly in front of us now. Close, too close. The floorboards creaked. Something moved toward us. Luke lifted the Polaroid camera. The flash went off. For that half second of bright white light, I saw him. He was massive. I have never seen another human being that large in my life. He had to be at least 6'8", maybe taller. His skin was pale white, almost the color of old bone. Long, colorless hair hung around his face in thin, dirty strings. He was wearing navy blue coveralls, torn around the sleeves and stained from age and swamp water. But what I remember most were his eyes. They were red, not just bloodshot. Red, deep, wet, and burning in the flash. They looked straight at us, and in that instant, it felt like he was looking through me instead of at me. Like he could see every fear I had ever tried to hide. He was standing directly in front of us, close enough that he could have reached out and touched us. When the flash went off, he did not flinch. He did not cover his face. He did not move at all. I could not move either. My body locked up. My brain knew I should run, but my legs would not listen. The darkness fell back over us after the flash, and the only thing left was that breathing. Slow, heavy, close. Then Luke took a second picture. The flash hit again, and this time I saw his hand stretched out toward Luke's face. His fingers were long and pale. They were only inches away from him. That broke whatever spell had frozen us. We ran. I do not remember the first few seconds clearly. It was just panic. Luke grabbed my arm in the dark, hard enough to hurt, and somehow we found the door. We crashed outside and went straight off the dock into the water. I do not think either of us even looked for the canoe. We just hit the swamp and started moving. The water was shallow enough to run through, but it dragged at our legs. Mud sucked at our shoes. Branches scratched our arms and faces. I slipped more than once and almost went under. My mind went blank except for one thought: get away. Behind us, I could hear him. I heard the same heavy breathing. I heard water moving hard. I heard branches snapping. Something big was coming through the swamp after us. I never looked back. I was too afraid that if I turned my head, I would see him right behind me, reaching for my neck. Luke was somewhere beside me, or ahead of me. I could hear him splashing and gasping for air. Neither of us spoke. There was no time for words. The swamp felt endless. Every shadow looked like it was moving. Every tree seemed to grab at us. All I could think about was his hand, his eyes, those red eyes staring out from that flash of light. They were not like the eyes of a scared man living in the woods. They were not even like the eyes of an angry man. There was something empty and ancient in them. I know that sounds dramatic, but I do not know how else to explain it. For 1 second, I felt like I had looked into something that did not belong in the world I understood. After maybe 5 or 10 minutes, the sounds behind us stopped. At first, I did not trust it. I kept running. Then, when I could not hear the breathing anymore, I turned my head. He was standing in the dark behind us. Even from that distance, I could see how huge he was. The moonlight caught enough of him to show the pale shape of his face and body between the trees. He did not move. He did not call out. He did not make a sound. He just stood there, watching us go. I have never understood why he stopped. Maybe he got tired. Maybe he did not want to leave a certain part of the swamp. Maybe he was letting us leave. Maybe he never meant to kill us at all. I have thought about it more times than I can count, and I still do not have an answer. When we finally made it back to camp, we were soaked, shaking, and covered in mud. We stopped under one of the lamps near a sidewalk and tried to catch our breath. For a while, neither of us could speak. The camp around us was still quiet. The kids were asleep. It felt impossible that they had no idea what was sitting so close to them out there in the swamp. We went to the mess hall and called the police. I did not want to wake the campers or cause panic, so when I spoke to the officers, I told them to come in from the south side, through some old abandoned farmland near the property. I remember my voice shaking while I tried to explain what we had seen. I do not know how much they believed me at first. I probably sounded insane. Somehow, after that, I went to bed. I have no idea how. My body must have simply shut down. I lay there until morning, staring into the dark corners of the council cabin, waiting to hear heavy breathing outside the window. Morning came, and nobody said much to us directly. There was movement around the camp, quiet conversations among the adults, and the kind of tension people try to hide from children. I knew before I even left that I would never come back the following summer. Over the next few weeks and months, the case developed. I gave a formal statement. Luke did too. There was local news coverage, though I tried not to watch all of it. Eventually, I was told he had been found and apprehended. I heard it took 6 men to move him, not because he fought them, not because he attacked. From what I was told, he simply would not move. They described it like trying to move a boulder. He sat or stood there, and no matter what they said or did, he did not respond. His size alone made everything difficult. They finally got him out and transferred him to a correctional facility somewhere in northern Louisiana. After that, I tried very hard to forget. The locals, and later the authorities, gave him the name that appeared in most of the coverage. They called him the Albino Man. I hated that name. It made him sound like a campfire legend, like a monster made up to scare children. But he was not just a legend to me. I had seen him standing close enough to touch. I had heard him breathing in the dark. I had felt the swamp water dragging at my legs while he came after us. Years passed. Luke and I stayed in touch for a while, but like many friendships, it slowly faded. We called less. Then we only sent cards once in a while. Then even that stopped. Life moved forward, or at least it looked like it did. I got older. I built a normal life. I learned how to avoid thinking about Camp Clearwater. Then, about 2 weeks ago, Luke called me. When I saw his name, I felt something cold move through me before I even answered. We had not spoken in years. I tried to act normal at first. I asked how he was. I asked about his life. But Luke had not called to catch up. He told me he had recently driven through the Clearwater Loop. The camp had been closed for years by then. His father still owned the land, though. Sometime after the incident, his father had a fence installed along the southern boundary to keep people away from the swamp. Luke said he had helped build part of that fence himself. They had driven the posts deep into the ground because they wanted it strong. He said he had only been passing through. He slowed down near the old property and looked toward the fence from the road. A section of it was broken. Not loose, not sagging. Broken, one whole section had collapsed, and the posts had been torn out of the ground. Luke said the earth around it was destroyed, churned up like something had come through with force. I tried to tell him maybe it was an animal. A large animal can do a lot of damage if it panics or gets trapped. Luke did not accept that. He said he knew that fence. He and his father had built it. He said there was no way a normal animal did that. Whatever tore it down had to be big, strong, stronger than anything that should have been out there. He never said exactly what he thought it meant, but he did not have to. I knew. I felt it too. The same old fear was back between us, even through the phone. Before we hung up, Luke told me he had sent me a letter. It was around Christmas break, and I had not been checking the mail every day. He said he called because he knew it had probably arrived by then. Inside the envelope, he said, was a copy of the Polaroid from that night. The first one. The picture from the moment we saw him in the hut. I remembered the second photo, too. the one where his hand was reaching toward Luke's face. I asked Luke about it. He said he had dropped the camera when we ran. Somehow he had pocketed the first photo before everything went bad, but the second one was lost on the floor of that hut. Later, he tried to get it back through official channels. He was told that any physical evidence collected from the scene was confidential and would not be released. Maybe that was for the better. After Luke and I hung up, I started researching. I did not even know what I was looking for at first. I think I just wanted proof that my fear was irrational. I wanted to find some clean explanation. A report. A name. A history that made sense. Instead, I found things I wish I had known when I worked at Camp Clearwater. Before the camp existed, there were records of families living on that property. Some of those records ended with disappearances, not accidents, not moves to another town. People simply vanished. Before the current ownership, a diocese had run the land for a time, and the same pattern appeared there too. One disappearance per summer. Every summer. Then the property was sold, and the pattern seemed to disappear from public conversation. Nobody had connected at all. Or maybe some people had and chose not to say it out loud. I also searched for whatever I could find about the case itself. Real police documentation. Old records. Anything with dates and names. I was surprised to find anything, but what I did find made everything worse. He had no name, no real record of any kind. No identification was ever found. No fingerprint matches came back. Nothing connected him to any school, hospital, family, prison, military record, or missing person file. In every document I found, he was listed as John Doe. That alone was strange, but I could almost force myself to explain it. Some people fall through the cracks. Some people live off the grid. Some people grow up without proper records, especially in older times and isolated places. But there was something else I found that I cannot explain. He never spoke. Not once. The documents did not describe him as refusing to talk. They made it sound more like he could not talk, or that speech meant nothing to him. They brought people in to communicate with him. Different languages, different methods. Nothing worked. He did not respond to English. He did not respond to any other language they tried. He did not answer to commands. He did not react to questions. He just existed in whatever room they put him in. That detail has stayed with me. A normal man, even a dangerous one, has some kind of reaction to the world. Anger, fear, confusion, defiance, something. But from what I read, he gave them nothing. He was just there, silent and huge and pale, like something pulled out of the swamp and placed under fluorescent lights. I tried to find current information about the correctional facility in northern Louisiana. I did not find much. Just small references, old mentions, and a few inmate records that seemed to suggest he was still listed there. There were rumors, of course. There are always rumors around things people do not understand. Rumors about guards refusing to go near his cell alone. Rumors about strange sounds. Rumors that he never aged the way he should have. I do not know what to believe. I only know what I saw. The letter Luke sent me is still sitting on my kitchen table. I have walked past it more times than I can count. It is just an envelope, plain and harmless looking, but it feels heavier than it should. I know what is inside. I know what that photo looks like. I remember the flash. I remember his face. I remember the red eyes and the pale hand reaching out of the dark. Part of me wants to open it and prove to myself that it was real. Another part of me is terrified that the picture will look exactly the way I remember it. Because if it does, then the past is not just a memory. It is proof. And if Luke is right about that broken fence, then maybe the thing we found in the swamp all those years ago was never really gone. Maybe it was only waiting. Story 3. I always left my house with plenty of time to spare. That was one of my little rules. I hated being late. I hated rushing even more. And when you lived anywhere near Chicago, you had to respect traffic the same way you respected bad weather. You didn't argue with it. You didn't fight it. You planned around it and hoped it didn't ruin your morning anyway. So I always added extra time to my drive, sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes more. It depended on the day, the weather, the construction, the crashes, the angry drivers, and whatever other nonsense the city decided to throw at everyone trying to get to work. That morning should have been simple. If everything went right, I would have reached the office by 7:30, maybe even a little before that. I liked getting in early. I liked making coffee before the phones started ringing. I liked being settled before my staff came in. I was the neighborhood services manager, which meant I was the boss of my department, and I believed in setting an example. But Chicago had other plans. By the time I was on 290, traffic had slowed to a crawl. Then it slowed even more. Then it became the kind of traffic where you started wondering if your car was even moving or if the road itself was just pretending. Every few seconds, we rolled forward a few feet. Then we stopped. Then we rolled again. Brake lights glowed in front of me like a long red river that stretched as far as I could see. At first, I was irritated. I kept checking the clock. 7:30 was slipping away. Then 7:40 started to look more likely. After that, I stopped guessing. There was no point. I had to be in the office, and to get there, I had to drive. That was all there was to it. I tried to calm myself down. I told myself it wasn't worth getting upset over. Nobody was going to punish me if I walked in late. I was the manager. If anyone asked, I could point out that half the city had probably been stuck in the same traffic with me. Still, I hated it. Being late made me feel careless, even when it wasn't my fault. The podcast I had playing through the speakers became background noise. I couldn't focus on it anymore. My mind began drifting, and because traffic was moving so slowly, I started noticing things I normally passed too quickly to see. There were big houses crowded shoulder to shoulder on both sides of the expressway, pushed up close to the road like they were trapped there. There was graffiti on the overpasses, some of it high up in places that made me wonder how anyone had reached them. Did they climb down from above? Did they climb up from below? Either way, it seemed like too much work for a few letters in spray paint. In the lane beside me, there was a young woman, maybe in her 20s, with more piercings in her face than I could count. One of them had stretched her cheek into a hole so wide I imagined I could poke my thumb through it. She seemed to be talking to herself, or singing along to music. Her head moved with sharp little motions, her mouth opening and closing, her hands lifting and dropping while she sat behind the wheel. To my left, beyond another lane of traffic, there was a concrete barrier. Beyond that was the commuter rail line. Silver poles stood along it, each one with a reflective sticker. I started reading the letters and numbers because there was nothing else to do. KB8, KB9, KB7, then another one. KA8, the stickers weren't mile markers. They were too close together for that. Maybe 100 feet apart, maybe less. I wondered what they meant. Maintenance points? Emergency markers? Something for the rail workers? I had driven that route so many times and never really seen them before. That was the strange thing about being forced to slow down. The world showed you all the small details you usually ignored. Traffic still barely moved. Up ahead, a truck passed over an overpass from left to right, coughing white smoke into the pale morning sky. The smoke spread and faded into the thin clouds above us. I watched it longer than I should have, just because it was the only thing moving at a normal speed. My feet were bothering me. They always did during the work week. I had edema, and sitting too long made my feet swell until my shoes felt tight and mean. Since we were hardly moving, I slipped one shoe off, then the other. I pushed them around with my toes and tried to hook them out of the way. I leaned forward, much too close to the steering wheel, trying to get my shoes positioned where they wouldn't slide under the pedals. That was when the vehicle in front of me suddenly seemed to rush closer. For one terrifying second, I thought I was going to hit him. I scrambled to get my foot back on the brake. My heels slipped once. Then I found the pedal and slammed down harder than I needed to. My car jerked. My seatbelt grabbed my chest. I let out a sharp breath and stared ahead. The cars in front of us had stopped again, but there was a large gap in front of the vehicle directly ahead of me. Several car lengths at least. I didn't know why he had stopped so far back, but in that moment I was too relieved to care. Calm, I told myself. That was the word for the day. Calm, Chicago traffic wasn't going to give me a stroke. Not today. Not if I could help it. Then the driver in front of me did something strange. His door opened. At first, I smiled. It was the kind of tired, bitter smile people get when something is so annoying it almost becomes funny. I thought maybe he had finally had enough of the traffic. Maybe he wanted to stretch his legs. Maybe he wanted to look ahead and see what was causing the delay. He stepped out of his vehicle. He was an ordinary-looking man. Not old, not young, not someone who would have caught my attention anywhere else. He looked healthy enough from where I sat. Just a man in work clothes, standing in the middle of stopped traffic on a weekday morning. I glanced over at the woman with all the piercings, as if we were sharing the moment. I wanted to make eye contact with her and silently say, "Are you seeing this guy?" But she wasn't looking. She was still moving her mouth, still caught up in whatever song or conversation was happening inside her car. I checked my rearview mirror, but I could only make out the shadow of the driver behind me. No one seemed interested. No one seemed to notice. Traffic had fully stopped now. There was no crawling forward anymore. As long as the man in front of me was out of his car, I figured it was safe enough to put mine in park. So I did. The man stood beside his open door for a moment. Then he started to whistle. At first, I didn't understand what he was doing. His lips were rounded into a small O, and his cheeks moved slightly as he blew. Then I heard the thin sound of it, drifting over the soft rumble of engines and the occasional far-off honk. He was whistling. Some people squeeze stress balls. Some people tap the steering wheel. Some people make fists with their toes. Some people whistle. I took off my shoes. Maybe this guy got out of his car and whistled. I tried to make it normal in my head because that was easier. A horn sounded somewhere on the east side of 290. I looked that way, like I might be able to spot who had done it. As if finding the honking driver would somehow give me a witness. A partner. Someone else in this strange little moment. Someone who could confirm I wasn't the only one seeing things. That was the way traffic made strangers feel connected for a few minutes. We were all sealed inside our own little boxes, inching along the same road, going to different jobs, different problems, different lives. We were alone, but also together. A sea of people who would never know one another, passing each other every day while barely moving at all. Then the man in front of me walked away from his car. That was when my smile faded. He didn't walk toward the shoulder. He didn't walk forward to look at the traffic. He turned left, toward the concrete barrier. "What the hell are you doing?" I said out loud. Nobody heard me. My windows were up. My doors were locked. My voice stayed inside the car with me. The man reached the concrete divider and put his hands on it. He climbed up awkwardly, like someone climbing a low wall in a dream. For 1 second, he froze at the top. He looked almost insect-like, stuck there with his arms and legs bent around the concrete. Then he shifted his weight and threw one leg over. My body went cold. There was a small metal fence on top of the barrier, maybe 1.5 feet high. It wasn't meant to stop anyone serious. It was just enough to tell people not to cross. He moved over it like it was nothing. In my mind, everything started happening too slowly and too fast at the same time. I thought about pulling out my phone. I thought about texting someone. I thought about calling 911. I thought about opening my door. I thought about screaming. I thought about doing all of it at once. But my body didn't move. Or maybe it moved in the useless way all bodies move, carried through time, falling forward second by second. I was there, but I wasn't doing anything. I was trapped behind my steering wheel, staring through my windshield as if the glass had become a wall between my world and his. Then I remembered the train. We had passed the commuter train almost 10 minutes earlier, just before traffic had narrowed and slowed to nothing. The train had been behind us then. It had been moving along its own path while we sat trapped in ours. We had been stopped almost long enough. The thought hit me so hard that it felt physical, like someone had pressed a thumb into the center of my chest. I waved at him. It was stupid. I know it was stupid. But I waved as if he might look back at me, as if our eyes might meet, as if one thin human connection could pull him back from whatever dark place had swallowed him. I waved like I was trying to wake a sleepwalker. He didn't look at me. He crossed the narrow strip of patchy grass beside the tracks. His shoes moved onto the gray rocks. The rocks shifted under him as he stepped between the rails. I had always heard people talk about the danger of a third rail. Some people imagined all train tracks as electric death traps. But this was Metra. It wasn't dangerous in that way. The trains were powered by diesel engines. A person was not going to die from electricity out there. That thought came to me for some reason, clear and useless. Electricity would not kill him. The train would. The man stood on the tracks and looked around. He turned his head from one side to the other, but he did not seem to be searching for anything. He looked more like a person killing time, like someone waiting at a bus stop, like someone standing in line at a store. I realized later that I could have gotten out of my car. I could have opened the door. I could have shouted. I could have run to the barrier and begged him to come back. I could have tried to climb after him, though that would have been foolish and dangerous. I could have done something. But at that moment, I was an animal locked in a cage. I could not work the simple controls around me. The door handle, the window button, the horn, the phone. Things I had known how to use since I was young became impossible. My brain seemed to protect me from my own choices by freezing me in place. Or maybe that is just what fear does. Maybe my body knew it was already too late. The man raised both hands into the air. Then he lowered them. Then he raised them again. It looked almost like victory, like he had won something, like he had reached the end of a race no one else knew he had been running. I was watching a living man perform the last movements of his life. That thought has never left me. I tried to scream, but the sound did not come out right. It got caught somewhere inside me. At the same time, I had the horrible feeling that I was outside my own body, looking back in. Part of me was behind the wheel, frozen and helpless. Another part of me was above it all, watching a man who looked perfectly healthy standing in the place where he was about to die. Then the train came. No one else saw him, or if they did not react in time. The woman with the piercings was still inside her own world. The driver behind me was still just a silhouette. The cars around us were full of faces pointed forward, bored and frustrated, waiting for traffic to move. I saw him. But seeing him was not enough. The train struck him. It did not make him disappear the way a movie might show it. It did not end as cleanly or as quickly as my mind begged it to end. For a few seconds, there was still something human there, dragged and broken beneath the iron wheels. The clothes tore. The body twisted. The train kept moving. The sound was worse than I can explain. Metal, brakes, wheels, screams, grinding, all of it mixing together into one horrible noise. The conductor must have realized something had gone wrong because the brakes screamed hard against the tracks. Sparks flashed beneath the train. The whole thing shuddered as it slowed. But it had already happened. The train stopped maybe 20 yards later, maybe a little more. Enough of the man remained visible for everyone to understand there was no hope, even though an ambulance came anyway. I saw it on the service drive, unable to reach us directly. The traffic had trapped everything. Cars, people, help, even death seemed stuck in the jam with the rest of us. 2 EMS workers came down toward the tracks. I remember noticing their hands. They did not rush the way people rush when there is still a life to save. Their movements were careful and slow. They looked like people arriving too late and already knowing it. That detail hurt me more than it should have. There was no heroic effort, no desperate fight, no miracle. Just the final, quiet work that comes after a person is no longer a person in the way they were before. One of the EMS workers, a man, looked down at what was left and made a small motion with his shoulders. I cannot prove it was a shrug. I cannot swear he meant anything by it. But that is what it looked like to me. A helpless little shrug, as if he had no idea what anyone expected him to do. And the worst part was that I understood it. What could he do? What could anyone do? The man on the tracks had crossed some invisible line before his feet ever stepped over the rail. By the time the rest of us understood what was happening, he was already gone in every way that mattered. I stared at the scene, but I also tried not to see it. My eyes were open, but my mind kept sliding away, refusing to hold the image clearly. There were too many details, too many pieces, too much red on gray stone, too much fabric where fabric should not have been, too many parts of a person separated from the idea of a person. My thoughts turned ugly and strange, the way thoughts do when horror becomes too large to handle. I imagined the body as meat because that was easier than thinking of him as a man. I imagined someone picking bits of torn clothing away. I imagined the metallic taste of blood, the grit of rocks, the hard crunch of something that should never be near teeth. The thoughts disgusted me as soon as they came, but they came anyway. Maybe the mind makes jokes in the presence of terror because it has no better tool. Maybe it turns everything into something false because the truth is too sharp. I looked away from the tracks, but only with my attention. My eyes stayed there. I could not make them move. After a while, I turned on the radio. I do not know why. The podcast had ended, or maybe I had stopped hearing it. I needed a voice that did not belong to me. I needed something ordinary. A commercial, a traffic report, a weather update, anything from the normal world. A man with a smooth, honest-sounding voice was talking about helping people get out of their timeshares. He sounded warm and cheerful, like he had never seen anything terrible in his life. His voice filled the car, and for a few seconds, the whole morning became unreal. Outside my windshield, a man was dead on the tracks. Inside my car, someone was promising freedom from vacation property fees. Then the commercial ended, and the news came on. The announcer mentioned an accident involving a train. At first, I thought they were talking about what had just happened. My stomach tightened. I wondered how they could already know. I wondered if someone had called it in faster than I understood. I wondered if I was about to hear the same moment described back to me by a stranger with a calm radio voice. But they were not talking about that morning. They were talking about yesterday. Around the same time yesterday morning, another man had been hit by a train. Another man. Same area, same time. The police had already released his name. Kevin. My name is Kevin. For 1 second, everything inside me went silent. The radio kept talking, but the words stretched and thinned until they barely made sense. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I stared at nothing. Not at the tracks. Not at the cars. Not at the silver poles or the concrete barrier or the open door of the dead man's vehicle. Kevin, same as me. The last name was different. His last name started with a B. Mine didn't. That should have made me feel better. And in some way, it did. I let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. It was not exactly relief. Relief felt like too clean a word. It was more like release, like something that had been wrapped tightly around my ribs had loosened by 1 inch. But the feeling did not last, because the man I had watched die that morning had climbed over the barrier near one of those silver poles. KA8, KB8, KB9, KB7. Letters and numbers I had been reading just minutes earlier to pass the time. And yesterday, another Kevin had died around the same time. I started wondering what the stickers meant again. I started wondering if the letters were not random. I started wondering if I had been looking at warnings without knowing they were warnings. Traffic ahead began to move. Not quickly, not normally, but enough that brake lights started blinking off one by one. Cars shifted forward. Engines rumbled. People who had seen nothing continued their mornings. They would get to work late and complain about it. They would tell coworkers traffic had been horrible. They would drink coffee. They would answer emails. They would forget the delay by lunch. I was not going anywhere soon. The vehicle in front of me still sat there with the driver's door open, empty. I stared at that open door for a long time. It looked like an invitation. It looked like a mouth. It looked like something waiting for the next person to step out. Story 4. I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind because of work. At first, I thought it was just normal stress. Everyone gets tired. Everyone gets annoyed with their job. Everyone has bad days where emails keep coming, meetings run too long, and people ask for things that should have been handled days ago. I kept telling myself that was all it was. I told myself I was just tired and that after a good weekend of sleep, I would feel normal again. But that never happened. The pressure kept building until it felt like something heavy was sitting on my chest every second of the day. My phone buzzed from the moment I woke up until the moment I tried to sleep. Emails came in non-stop. My calendar was packed with Zoom calls, most of them pointless, but still somehow urgent. People wanted answers before I even understood the questions. My manager kept changing deadlines. Clients kept changing their minds. Every day felt like I was being buried under another pile of work, and no matter how hard I dug, I never got closer to the surface. I started waking up before my alarm with my heart racing. Sometimes I would lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, already feeling exhausted before the day had even begun. I would check my phone and see 20 new messages, and that sick feeling would twist inside my stomach. I stopped eating proper meals. I stopped going out. I stopped calling people back. Even when I was not working, my brain would not shut off. I would be standing in the shower thinking about spreadsheets. I would be brushing my teeth while replaying conversations from meetings. I would lie in bed at night and hear notification sounds even when my phone was on silent. Eventually, I realized I needed to get away before I completely broke. I did not want a hotel. I did not want a resort. I did not want crowds, music, bars, beach clubs, or people asking me what I did for work. I wanted silence. I wanted somewhere far away where nobody knew me, where my phone barely worked, and where I could pretend for a few days that the rest of my life did not exist. That was how I ended up booking an old rustic house through Eco Ibiza. The listing called it a finca, an old country house with stone walls, wooden beams, and a wide view of the hills. It was located in Sant Juan de la Bricha, in the northern part of Ibiza, far away from the loud party side of the island that most people know about. The photos showed dirt roads, thick woods, old olive trees, and dry stone walls. It looked peaceful, empty, almost forgotten. That was exactly what I wanted. When I arrived, the house looked even older than it had in the pictures. The walls were rough and pale, the windows were small, and the front door looked like it had been there for 100 years. The air smelled of dust, dry grass, and warm stone. Around the house, there was nothing but woods and rocky hills. No neighbors close by. No traffic. No music. Just insects, wind, and the strange, deep silence that comes when you are far away from everything. For the first few hours, I thought I had made the right choice. I turned off most notifications on my phone. I unpacked slowly. I sat outside with a bottle of water and watched the sun go down behind the trees. The sky turned orange, then purple, then black. When night came, the darkness was thicker than I expected. Out there, without city lights, the woods looked endless. The trees became tall black shapes pressed against the stars. Every little sound seemed closer than it should have been. Still, I slept better that first night than I had in months. The next morning, I woke up feeling slightly human again. Not happy exactly, but not completely crushed either. I made coffee in the small kitchen and stood barefoot on the cool stone floor while sunlight moved across the walls. There was no email waiting for me that needed an answer. No meeting starting in 10 minutes. No one asking if I had a quick second to discuss something that would ruin my day. By the second day, I decided to visit the old town nearby. I wanted to walk, buy some food, maybe sit somewhere and drink coffee without looking at my laptop. The town was quiet and beautiful in a worn-down way. Narrow alleys twisted between whitewashed buildings. Wooden doors stood half open. Plants hung from balconies. A few old people sat outside, talking softly. It felt like the kind of place where time moved slower. That was where I met Lilia. I first noticed her because she did not seem to belong to the normal flow of the street. Everyone else was walking somewhere, carrying bags or talking to someone. Lilia was just standing near a wall in the shade, watching people pass with a calm expression on her face. She had dark hair that fell loosely around her shoulders and eyes that seemed too focused, like she could see through whatever you were trying to hide. When I passed her, she looked directly at me. I looked away, then looked back. She smiled. It was not a friendly tourist smile. It was quieter than that. Stranger, like she already knew something about me. "You look like you are carrying the weight of the world," she said. Her English was clear, but there was a soft accent underneath it. I gave a weak laugh because I did not know what else to do. "I guess I look that bad?" "You look tired in a way sleep cannot fix," she said. That made me stop smiling. Maybe it should have made me uncomfortable, but at that moment, I was too worn down to care. There was something about her voice that made me want to keep listening. She did not speak like she was making small talk. She spoke like every word had been chosen carefully. "I came here to get away from work," I told her. "It's been a lot." She nodded as if she already knew. "Sitting alone in an old house will not fix you." I thought silence might help. "Silence helps some people," she said. "But not people like you." I should have asked what that meant. Instead, I just stood there, feeling strangely embarrassed, like she had caught me pretending to be fine. Then she stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Tonight, there is a real party deep in the woods." I almost laughed again. "A party? Not the kind tourists go to," she said. "Not clubs, not drinking on a beach. Something older, something honest." The way she said older made my skin prickle. Before I could ask where it was or who would be there, she reached into a small cloth bag hanging from her shoulder and pulled out a folded paper map. It looked old, not like something printed for tourists. The paper was soft at the edges, worn from being opened and closed many times. She unfolded it against the wall and ran one finger along the roads north of town. Then she took out a red pencil and marked a spot in the middle of nowhere. "Follow the map," she said. "When the road ends, you will know where to go." I stared at the red mark. "What time?" "When you feel the night pulling you," she said. That should have been enough for me to walk away. Any normal person would have smiled politely, thrown the map in the trash, and gone back to their rented house. But I was not thinking like a normal person. I was tired, lonely, and desperate to feel something besides panic. Lilia was strange, yes, but she was also the first person in months who had looked at me like I was more than a problem to be solved or a task to be finished. So I took the map. That evening, I tried to ignore it. I cooked a simple dinner at the finca, though I barely ate. I sat outside while the sky darkened and told myself I was not going anywhere. The idea was stupid, dangerous even. I was alone in a foreign place with a paper map from a woman I had met in an alley. There was no reason to trust her. There was no reason to drive into the woods at night. But the house felt different after sunset. The silence no longer felt peaceful. It felt like it was waiting for me to make a decision. The woods around the finca were black and still. No cars passed. No voices carried from the road. Even the insects seemed quieter than they had the night before. I sat there with a map on the table beside me, trying not to look at the red mark. Around 10, I picked it up. I do not know exactly what made me leave. Maybe curiosity. Maybe boredom. Maybe the kind of reckless thinking that comes when your mind has been pushed too far for too long. All I know is that I found myself grabbing my keys, getting into the rental car, and pulling away from the finca with the folded map on the passenger seat. The drive took almost an hour. At first, the roads were narrow, but normal. Then, they became rougher. Then, the pavement disappeared completely. I followed twisting dirt roads through dark hills, the headlights shaking over rocks, dry grass, and low stone walls. Branches scraped the sides of the car. More than once, I thought I had taken the wrong turn, but each time the map seemed to line up again with some hidden path or fork. There were no streetlights, no houses, no signs. Just the road, the trees, and the black sky above me. Finally, the dirt road ended in a flat patch of ground surrounded by thick woods. According to the map, I had reached the red mark. I turned off the engine. The silence that followed was so complete that my ears rang. For a few seconds, I just sat there with both hands on the steering wheel. I could feel my heart beating in my neck. The sane part of me whispered that this was the moment to turn around. I could still leave. I could go back to the finca. Sleep, wake up, and pretend none of this had happened. Then I felt it. Not heard it at first. Felt it. A low, heavy thumping moved through the ground and into the car. It was slow and deep, like a giant heartbeat buried somewhere inside the woods. Then came another beat. Then another. After a moment, I realized it was drums. Primitive drums. They were far away, but not too far. The sound seemed to roll between the trees, pulling at me. I stepped out of the car and stood in the dark, listening. The air was hot and dry. The smell of pine, dust, and wild herbs hung around me. The drums continued, steady and low. I should have been afraid. Instead, I felt something close to excitement. I locked the car and followed the sound on foot. There was no clear path at first, only spaces between the trees where the ground looked slightly flatter. The drums grew louder as I walked. Soon I could hear other sounds too, voices maybe, or singing, though the words were too distant to understand. Warm light flickered somewhere ahead, flashing between the trunks. The path finally opened into a wide clearing. I stopped at the edge of the trees. At first, my exhausted brain did not understand what I was looking at. It was so strange and unreal that I did not process it as danger. It looked like a dream, or a nightmare, or some old painting that should have been hanging in a museum. Dozens of people were gathered in the clearing. Fires burned in a wide circle, their flames twisting upward into the night. Men and women danced around them in frantic, uneven movements. They wore lightweight robes made of rough burlap, and the robes were covered with dry straw that shook and swayed as they moved. Some had flowers tangled in their hair. Others had mud smeared across their arms and faces. The drums came from a group sitting near the far side of the clearing. They beat large hand drums in a rhythm that seemed simple at first, but the longer I listened, the more it got inside my body. It made my hands tremble. It made my chest feel open. It made the world outside the clearing feel very far away. In the center stood a platform made from a huge tree trunk, cut flat across the top. 4 men were tied to it with thick ropes. That should have snapped me out of it. But the men were not screaming. They were not begging. They were laughing. All 4 of them were laughing so hard their bodies shook against the ropes. Their eyes were wide and bright. Their mouths hung open in wild smiles. Every now and then, one of them would start singing in a language I did not understand, and the others would join in, their voices rising and falling with the drums. They looked drugged. They looked happy. I stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of it. Then Lelia appeared beside me. I did not hear her come. One moment I was alone at the edge of the clearing, and the next she was there, smiling at me in the firelight. "You came," she said. "I don't know what this is," I whispered. She reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were warm. "Do not think. You think too much. That is why you suffer." Before I could answer, she pulled me into the crowd. The heat hit me first. The fires burned hot, and the summer air was already heavy. Sweat ran down my back almost immediately. The drums pounded through me. People brushed against my shoulders and spun past me, laughing, chanting, breathing hard. At first, I moved awkwardly, too aware of my own body, too aware of how strange everything was. But Lelia kept her hand around mine. She spun in front of me, her hair moving around her face, her eyes shining with the fire. She looked beautiful in a way that was almost frightening. Not soft or sweet, but alive, fully alive, like every part of her belonged to the heat, the drums, the woods, and the night. I do not know when I started dancing with her. One moment I was standing there, stiff and uncertain. The next, my feet were moving. My arms were moving. My breathing changed. The rhythm took over the parts of my mind that would not stop worrying. It pushed out the emails, the meetings, the deadlines, the guilt, the fear. For the first time in a very long time, I was not thinking about tomorrow. I was only there. The fires moved around me in long orange streaks. The faces of the dancers blurred. The drums grew faster. Lilia laughed, and I laughed too, not because anything was funny, but because something inside me had cracked open and let the pressure out. For a few minutes, maybe longer, I felt free. Then the drums stopped. The silence came so suddenly that everyone froze. I turned toward the platform. 4 men wearing masks made of dried mud stepped forward from the shadows. Their masks had no expression, only dark holes where the eyes should have been. Each one held a curved blade that reflected the firelight. My mind tried to reject what I was seeing. The tied men on the tree trunk laughed harder. One of them lifted his head and shouted something joyfully into the night. Another began to sing again, his voice shaking with excitement. Then, all at once, the masked men moved. The blades flashed. The 4 tied men went still. For a second, there was no sound at all. Then blood sprayed across the wooden trunk and into the air, hot and red under the firelight. It fell over the ground, over the platform, over the people standing closest to it. A fine mist of it touched my face before I could move. I could feel it on my skin. Warm, real, my body locked in place. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My brain kept telling me I had not seen it, that this was some performance, some trick, some terrible illusion made with fake blood and actors. But the smell reached me then, thick and metallic, and I knew it was real. The four men were dead. Instead of screaming, the crowd erupted. They did not run. They did not panic. They went wild with joy. People threw their heads back and howled. They danced harder than before, stamping their feet into the dirt. They stretched their arms toward the platform as more blood ran down the sides of the tree trunk. Some rubbed it across their faces. Others smeared it into the straw on their robes, laughing as if they had been blessed. I grabbed Lelia's arm. "We have to go," I said, though my voice barely sounded like mine. "We have to leave now." She looked at me with bright, feverish eyes. "No," she said. "Do not be afraid." "They killed them," I said. "Lilia, they killed them." She smiled wider, almost glowing with joy. "They wanted this. They chose this honor." I shook my head. "What are you talking about?" She leaned close so I could hear her over the noise of the crowd. "This blood is for our beloved leader," she said, "our king of kings." The words made my stomach turn cold. Around us, the dancers began locking hands. One by one, they formed a massive circle around the platform. Lelia pulled away from me and joined them. I stood alone near the edge of the circle, shaking, with blood drying on my face. The chanting started low. At first, it was only a murmur, a deep sound moving through many throats at once. Then, it grew louder. The voices came together until they seemed to shake the clearing itself. Lelia's voice rose above the others, clear and strong. They called to Cernunnos, guardian of the ancient woods. They called him the one who walked between roots and mist, the lord of beasts and forgotten paths, the spirit of the wilderness that never slept. They said they heard the thud of his steps in the silence of the night. They said they saw his antlers among the oak branches. They said the seasons turned in his name, and the rivers whispered his ancient secrets. As they chanted, the air changed. I know how that sounds, but there is no better way to explain it. The heat from the fire seemed to press down harder. The trees around the clearing looked taller. The darkness beyond them became deeper, almost solid. The smell of blood mixed with smoke and dry grass until every breath made me feel dizzy. I backed away slowly. No one stopped me. No one even looked at me. Every face was turned toward the platform. Then the chant reached its final line. Every torch and every fire went out at the same time. The clearing dropped into total darkness. Not dimness, not shadow. Darkness. I could not see my hands. I could not see the people beside me. I could not see the trees. I heard breathing all around me, dozens of people standing close in the black, but no one spoke. No one moved. Then, something moved behind the platform. I heard branches crack. Not small branches, thick ones. The ground trembled under my feet. A shape began to rise in the dark. At first, I thought it was part of the trees. Then it moved again, and I understood that it was standing behind them. It was taller than any person could ever be. Taller than the platform. Taller than the nearby trunks. Its outline was wrong, blurry and shifting, as if my eyes could not hold its shape. It leaned forward, and something wide and terrible emerged from its head. Antlers, massive deer antlers, spread out into the night, reaching like dead branches against the stars. I could not breathe. The thing did not look at the crowd. It did not look at me. It moved with slow, heavy purpose toward the platform. Long arms, or something like arms, reached over the tree trunk. I heard wet dragging sounds. I heard ropes snap. I heard the bodies being gathered up like offerings. Then the thing pulled them back into the woods. The sound of its movement faded slowly. Branches broke. Leaves shook. The ground seemed to answer each step. And then it was gone. For several seconds, nobody moved. The smell of copper filled the air so strongly that I thought I might be sick. Then, the torches flickered back to life. Just like that. The clearing looked almost normal again, except for the blood on the platform, the blood on the ground, and the blood on the people around me. Everyone began to stand and stretch, as if the night's main event had simply ended. Some people hugged. Some laughed softly. A few wiped their hands on their robes. Others chatted with each other in relaxed voices, like they were leaving a concert or a festival. No one looked shocked. No one looked guilty. No one seemed worried about the 4 dead men who had just been taken into the trees by something impossible. Lelia walked back to me. Her face and neck were streaked with blood, but her expression was calm, peaceful, beautiful, in a way that made my fear even worse. She took my hand again. I wanted to pull away. I should have pulled away. Instead, I let her fingers wrap around mine. "What was that?" I whispered. She looked toward the woods, then back at me. "Now we will be blessed until next year," she said. That was all. No explanation. No apology. No panic. Just that soft smile, as if she had given me something precious and expected me to understand. She guided me away from the clearing and back toward the path through the trees. Behind us, the others continued leaving in small groups, still laughing, still talking, still covered in blood and straw. The drums did not start again. The woods were quiet now, but not empty. I could feel something moving far away in the dark, something huge and ancient, something that had accepted what it had been given. We walked in silence for a long time. I kept waiting for the horror to fully hit me. I waited for my knees to give out, for my stomach to turn, for my mind to break under the weight of what I had seen. I had watched 4 people die. I had seen something come out of the woods that should not exist. I had blood on my clothes. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely feel my fingers. And yet, underneath all of that, something else was happening. The anxiety was gone, not reduced, not pushed aside. Gone, the tightness that had lived in my chest for months had disappeared. The constant noise in my head had gone silent. I was not thinking about work. I was not thinking about deadlines. I was not thinking about the hundreds of emails waiting for me or the people who wanted pieces of me every day. That terrible pressure, the thing that had followed me from my apartment to my office, to my bed, and finally across the sea to Ibiza, had vanished like smoke. In its place was peace. Deep, warm, impossible peace. That was the most terrifying part of all. Not the blood, not the masked men, not the bodies, not even the giant antlered thing that rose behind the trees and dragged the dead away into the dark. The worst part was the way I felt as Lilia led me back through the woods. Relieved, light, almost happy. I knew I should have been horrified. I knew I should have run to the police, to the airport, to anywhere far away from that place and those people. I knew that whatever had happened in that clearing was wrong in a way deeper than I could understand. But as her warm hand held mine, and the night air moved gently through the trees, I felt calm for the first time in years. By the time we reached my car, my breathing was steady. My heart was no longer racing. The world seemed quiet and soft around me. Even the blood drying on my shirt felt far away, like evidence from someone else's nightmare. Lelia stopped beside the driver's door and looked at me. "You needed to come," she said. I did not answer. "You were being eaten by a life that did not want you," she continued. "Now something else has noticed you." A chill moved through me, but it did not last. The peace returned almost instantly, covering the fear like warm water. "What happens now?" I asked. She smiled. "Now you rest." Then she stepped back into the darkness between the trees. I watched her disappear. I drove back to the finca in complete silence. I do not remember much of the road. I remember the headlights moving over dust and stones. I remember the smell of blood in the car. I remember pulling up outside the house and sitting there until the engine clicked and cooled. When I finally went inside, I took off my clothes and washed my face in the bathroom sink. The water turned pink, then red, then clear. I scrubbed harder, but I could still smell the copper. I expected to break down then. I expected to look in the mirror and see a man who had gone mad. Instead, I saw someone calm, too calm. I slept until noon the next day. When I woke up, sunlight filled the room. Birds called from the trees outside. My phone had dozens of notifications, emails, missed calls, messages from work marked urgent. I looked at them for a long time. Normally, just seeing them would have made my stomach twist. Normally, my hands would have started sweating. Normally, I would have opened my laptop before even brushing my teeth, desperate to stop everything from falling apart. But I felt nothing. No panic, no guilt, no fear. I placed the phone face down on the table and walked outside. The woods around the finca were bright and green under the sun. They looked harmless in daylight, but I knew better now. I knew there were paths out there that did not belong on any tourist map. I knew there were clearings where people danced in straw robes and gave blood to something older than language. I knew there were things in the northern woods of Ibiza that still walked between roots and mist, things people fed once a year so their lives could continue untouched. And I knew something else, too. Somewhere deep inside me, beneath the fear, beneath the disgust, beneath every reasonable thought I had left, a small part of me was grateful. That is what scares me most. Because I still remember the blood on my face. I still remember the 4 men laughing as the blades came close. I still remember the antlers rising above the trees. I still remember Lilia's peaceful smile when she said they would be blessed until next year. But I also remember the silence inside my head afterward. I remember the relief. And even now, after everything, I cannot deny the truth. It had been a very long time since I had felt that kind of peace.